Welcome back to another episode of the Braun Performance and Rehab Podcast, powered by ISOFIT, Oro Muscles, and Firefly Recovery. ISOFIT is my go-to for all things isometric strength training. For more on ISOFIT, be sure to check out isofit.com. Oro Muscles revolutionizes rehabilitation with real-time actionable insights into muscle activity with live biofeedback and instant analysis, which has made a huge impact in my work with athletes. For more on Oro, be sure to check out oromuscles.com. Episodes like this are made possible by Firefly, the official recovery provider of the Braun Performance and Rehab Podcast. For more on Firefly, be sure to check out recoveryfirefly.com. Joining me today is Marley Salveter. Marley and I are going to be diving into her journey as an athlete in soccer and her kind of unorthodox journey into soccer, where she was originally heading from a collegiate sports standpoint and how she ended up in the college soccer space, her next steps after college soccer. We also talk about her injury history and so many other amazing things along the way. This is a phenomenal conversation with Marley. I really appreciate her time and I really enjoyed our conversation, and I know you will too. Marley, welcome to the podcast. I'm super excited to work with you today. For people who might not be familiar with you as I am that way, or maybe they haven't kept up to date with the incredible soccer journey that you've been on that can only be described as like Marley and me, but except the dogging you never dies. Would you mind filling them in a little bit about who you are and all the incredible things that you've done?
Oh my gosh, that caption. I was so proud of that caption when it might be a little dated, but yes, so my name is Marley. I'm a recent graduate. I've played 5 years of college soccer, 3 of which I played at Oregon State University in what was formerly known as the Pac-12. That's where I got my bachelor's degree. And then I graduated a year early, entered the transfer portal immediately after, and then I went into grad school at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, which is where I got my graduate degree. And that's where I also played 2 additional years of soccer. So I was a COVID kid in college. That was my first year. With that first year, it interrupted our season, and so they actually gave us that additional 5th year. So I didn't get injured or I didn't have a redshirt season. It was just that COVID year. So I had the privilege of playing 5 years in college, and I graduated this past, I guess that was July 2024. But since then, I've been kind of trying to pave what I would consider potentially a rather unconventional path towards professional soccer is my end goal here. And I'm really excited to be on the podcast. What a cool opportunity to talk about my journey so far.
Oh, definitely. And like I said, I really appreciate your time that way. And what a journey you've been on. You mentioned the COVID era. Oh my goodness. It's just like everything changed during that time. And we absolutely love 5 years of collegiate soccer, healthy, injury-free. That is not common. We absolutely love that you had that experience in college. And you mentioned, you did some undergrad work, then you transferred to Las Vegas and you finished up with your grad degree there, but you didn't actually mention what you study and what you do outside of soccer, because I'm assuming you have a little bit of a life outside of sport.
I try to have a life. It can be, hard sometimes, as you know, as you talk to many athletes, balancing a life on top of not only being a student, but an athlete, and then transitioning into a career on top of being an athlete. So I got my undergrad degree in political science with a focus on sustainable policy. And then I transferred over and got my master's in journalism and media studies. And over there, I really got into climate communications. And so now I'm in the realm of podcasting like yourself. I have currently 2 contract part-time remote roles, both in the podcasting realm. And I'm actually looking to add on a 3rd job as I transition over to Miami to play soccer. I'll need to supplement my income with another job. So definitely balancing multiple different things in different areas, which is, I consider myself a jack of all trades, master of none. I love so many different things, and unfortunately, that's the only way I'm gonna, operate in life is to be able to do all of them at once. That's really just what makes me happy.
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely incredible. And to your point, there's that phrase that jack of all trades is a master of none. But I think people forget the second half of that phrase, which says, but oftentimes better than a master of one. I really respect the individual who can do a little bit of everything. And I think that there's something to be said about, for lack of a better way to put it, that modern day Renaissance approach to things. It's like you're just good at all of the things, not just one of them. And you brought up some interesting points that I really want to dive into and unpack a little bit more. First off, you mentioned you're heading to Miami pretty soon. What's bringing you to Miami? What's the occasion? What's so significant about you packing up and moving from West Coast all the way across the country to Florida?
Yeah, so I have to give a big shout out to Chase Sapphire credit card for giving me a pretty excellent promotion on the credit card points because that got me a full plane round trip to Miami to do a tryout for a semi-pro team. And yeah, I basically did what would be considered a cold call tryout. I literally went down there. That was my first time in the area, my first time meeting any of the players and the coaches, and I just tried out. And I was fortunate enough to make the team. And the last few weeks, I've been coordinating some like housing arrangements and whatnot. But it's a semi-professional team, so it's meant for exposure. And yeah, so far I've just been working to make connections and whatnot. But honestly, it may sound kind of odd to just kind of randomly, book it across to the other side of the country and try out for this team. But I'm pretty familiar with kind of just showing up places and seeing if things will work. Actually, before I went into college, I had zero Division I offers for soccer. I was actually committed to Oregon State for track. And I was a track athlete. I did multiple sports in high school, basketball, cross country, as well as soccer. But being born in a really rural area, I didn't have a lot of opportunities for exposure. And as I'm getting older, I'm really realizing how important the exposure aspect is, and really getting yourself in places that can get you seen. If it doesn't matter how much skill you have or how fit you are, if you're not in a place where coaches are going to find you, you're not going to get on a team. That's really what I've realized. It's the harsh reality of it. And so, yeah, in college, I also basically cold called. I just emailed this coach of Oregon State, and I was like, hey, I'm committed to your school for track. Do you need any more soccer players? That coach actually said no. He said, no, you're not good enough. He said I was a little on the shorter end. And then he got fired. So he got fired, and then a new coach came in, and he actually needed some new players. And so then I reached out to him again, and I said, hey, do you need any more players? I'm already committed for track here. And he said, well, you only play in high school. I don't see a lot of club experience on your end. And he's like, why don't you come down and do a tryout? And I'll just tell you afterwards. So I went to this tryout down at Oregon State and basically did the same thing I went down and did in Miami for Miami City FC. I just tried out, and he was like, yeah, you can be on the team. So I ended up making a major pivot and decommitting to track, fully committing to soccer. And then as a walk-on actually at Oregon State University, I was the only freshman to start and play all 19 games of the season. And I ended up gaining a scholarship after the fact, which then opened up when I entered into the transfer portal. A lot more schools were looking at me. And so I'm not unfamiliar with going down and doing these types of things. And I honestly had a lot of confidence in myself in that regard. But yep, making a big life change and going down to Miami to hopefully start this new chapter of my life into hopefully the professional world. And we'll see where that takes me.
That's absolutely incredible. And I'd imagine there's probably been some people that have given you a little bit of pushback on that journey. And I think that's very unfortunate, but I love the fact that you're out there and you're pursuing your dreams and you seem very tunnel visioned. You're locked in, you know what you want, you're willing to do whatever it takes. You'll spawn in wherever you have to go in order to pursue this ultimate goal of what you want out of life and out of sport that way. But a lot of times when I talk with people, that they're not met with a whole lot of support doing these things, and people push back on them and they say, well, you're being too irrational or you're not being logical, you should just settle, you should just get a comfortable 9 to 5 job, you played your years in college, and at this point, what is there to gain? And I hate that way of thinking, but for some reason I'm assuming you've had people say stuff just like that to you all the time.
Oh my gosh, I love that you asked this because honestly, I feel like, well, you're someone who obviously works with athletes on the daily. And so I know you understand this aspect of pushback you get, after graduating college. And yeah, not only have I been met with like, Marley, dude, you have a master's, just go get a job. What are you doing? But also this lack of structure. And so for me, believing in myself and going out and taking these chances, it was more a matter of necessity. It wasn't like I had all these people, I didn't have, current coaches who were like, yeah, continue. It's not like college or club. It really is up to you. And while that can be really intimidating and uncertain, it can also be really empowering because when you do make things happen, and I'm an optimist. I'm a relentless optimist, so I'm gonna make things happen. I'm gonna be really proud of myself in that I did that. But kind of pivoting here with the structure thing, like getting out of college, you no longer have people making schedules for you. You don't have your class schedule made for you. You don't have a nutritionist or a sports psychologist or someone for rehab. You don't have coaches pushing you constantly, giving you that motivational advice. It really is all up to you. And so not only the aspect of believing in myself, but also creating a lifestyle where I can make those things happen has been a significant. There is a lot of grunt work that happens in doing that. It's really difficult. Even just like I can't tell you how many countless drafts I've made of like training schedules. This calendar back here, it shows all these days. It shows days every day what I do in a daily basis, and on top of that, just nutrition and sleep, and then balancing on top of that multiple jobs and also which we can get into rehabbing an injury which I got, which was misdiagnosed. But I love that you asked that, and I think that's one of the reasons that makes your podcast so special is that you give people the platform to talk about their hopes and dreams, even if they may sound silly, because while they're in creation.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, I think if your dreams aren't big enough to scare people, then they're not actually dreams, right?
Yes.
Dreams are supposed to be these things that you can't even see them because of how big and incredible they are. You have to only have them exist in your mind. And to the point that you made before about how, you just kind of like made the plan as you went along. You didn't have the D1 college soccer offers and you had to travel and walk on and kind of build your own path instead of just climbing a ladder that was already set out in front of you that way. I think a lot of athletes can relate to that. And a lot of athletes feel like they've got to go out there and make their own mark and just kind of go their own path and blaze a trail forward, if you will, that way. And I think that that's something that teaches you so much about life that you'll find success in anything that you end up doing, no matter what the line of work is, whether it relates to your degree or not, whether it's relating to sport or not. You just take so much out of sport that you'll find success in anything moving forward. You gave the example of time management as you were talking about that. And I'd imagine, balancing D1 sports with academics, you've got to factor in practice time, training time, recovery time. You've actually got to sleep. You mentioned nutrition. So, that's kind of important from what I hear. And then, oh, by the way, you've got travel for games and events and that sort of thing. And now you've got to throw classes and schoolwork in on top of all of that. If you don't have a good ability to actually handle your day-to-day life, that becomes very impossible to, just live through, really. You just can't handle it and you crumble under the pressure that way. But that same pressure that can cause someone to fall apart can also turn someone into a diamond. And I think that, you need to look at that pressure as a privilege and embrace the lessons and the amazing things that can come from it that way. And it sounds like you certainly did just that.
Yeah, definitely refining my organizational skills were a must post college because again, it's not like you get out of school and you have less to work with. It's really you have maybe even more, but you don't have people telling you how to do it. And so, being in your 20s, regardless of early 20s, regardless of like if you're doing a sport or not, it's just chaotic. And so finding a way to like if you have a few set goals and they may be real bigger than you can even see in the picture currently, and you're like, how can I break this down into manageable steps? And then the confidence really comes after a few weeks or a few months where you're like, I couldn't do that many reps of this fitness 2 weeks ago. I wasn't making that shot top right corner a few weeks ago, and suddenly you're realizing I can do those things now. This is starting to materialize into the goal that I had, and maybe it is starting to zoom in a little bit, and you're really starting to see the benefits of your hard work. But yeah, it's really hard balancing those things, and I have listened to a few of your other podcasts, And it is comforting to see other girls, they struggle with the same thing, but it does teach you really. I think being a college athlete makes you speed run a lot of life lessons that maybe people who aren't an athlete may be confronted with a little later in life. But aside from managing the workload outside of the sport or kind of balancing everything, also being on the field or being on the court, whatever it may be, it just teaches you those real life skills like adversity and resilience and discipline and being really uncomfortable with being in pain and being tired. And I do feel like, while not everyone is a student athlete in college, coming out of that experience, maybe I had a little less social life. Maybe maybe my knees have a little less cartilage than they used to. But I have to say, I feel like I can do a lot of things now. And I definitely feel like I've gained some confidence in myself.
I think you just alluded to a big point too, is anything you do in life has an opportunity cost. And that's especially true for the athlete that way. So you have to give up a lot in
Mhm.
order to be a collegiate athlete. And you have to give up even more if you want to continue those athletics after your college career. And I think a lot of people don't fully understand or appreciate the opportunity cost unless they've gone through it themselves. You're not able to go out every single weekend with your friends and your family and hang out and enjoy a night out on the town. I'm sure that Vegas on a weekend is just absolutely incredible. Never been myself, but you have to miss out on a lot of those things, and you have to possibly miss out on some of the other fun things that occur because training is the priority, right? We've talked with athletes that give up their proms and give up all these crazy fun things that people draw memories from growing up that way, but ultimately they kind of root themselves in their sport a lot more than other aspects of life. And the other thing that I think you kind of alluded to that I think makes sport unique, and one of the things that I feel like a lot of people don't fully grasp the concept of, is a lot of people are still trying to measure their progress in life based on
Mm.
their the time that they spend on something, right? So, maybe they logged 10,000 hours of soccer practice, or maybe they logged, 5,000 hours of studying in order to get a degree, or, 1,000 hours of an internship, or whatever it is. And for them, they think of things all about the time spent or time invested into it. And I find a lot of the times athletes think differently, and it's not necessarily just about how much time they put in, but the actual quality of that time and what they did during that time, and actually how far could they travel in that time. So much so that there's now this whole field called sports science that literally tracks all these different metrics about athletes, looking at things like how far they went in a set amount of time. And
Yeah.
some athletes go further than others, even though they're, confined to the same time duration that way. And I think we need to change the conversation about progress and what it means to be successful in life and sport and so many of these other things, away from just how much time you put into it, and maybe about, hey, how far did you go? Because some people are going to be able to run the race a little bit faster than others. And that means they're going to be significantly more successful than others because they're able to cover the same distance in a quicker amount of time. And on that note as well, if you're running your race, whatever that looks like, and you're really freaking good and you're able to get a long ways really quick, you could potentially then turn around and help someone else out. And now they can run their race a little bit faster and get a little bit farther. And who knows, maybe the two of you can do things together that you couldn't do apart that way. And I think that the more we kind of like reframe our thought around progress for athletes and even just college students in general about what they actually do instead of just how much time you put into it, the better off we're all going to be that way.
Yeah, I agree with you. I was just talking with my family about this, but I can't stress the importance enough of imperfect action. Like you can spend how much you want preparing, but at the end of the day, do you have the courage? Do you have the bravery to go out and whether it's a tryout or even just practicing, or maybe you're coming back from an injury and you're trying to refine the perfect rehab plan for yourself. At the end of the day, you're gonna have to take that next step and just do it. And yeah, honestly, you don't. on a daily basis, I'm not going out and practicing for 4 hours. I'm curating very carefully crafted, very high intensity practices and trainings for myself that I can fit in between my jobs, because at the end of the day, we really don't have that much time. My thing just zoomed out. Um, but yeah, like I do agree. I think it really isn't about how much time you spend, but how you're spending that time. And as someone who has played 5 years of soccer, has really met the demands of what it takes to put in the technical work, the fitness work. It's not so much as the time being spent, but again, how you spend that time. And as your schedules get more demanding, as your lifestyle no longer is complements training, once you get out of college, I think that gets even more important because your time is 10 times more valuable, and there's less of it.
Oh, 100%, 100%. And you mentioned, imperfect action that way. And unfortunately, none of us are immune from imperfections, and we all have a tendency to make mistakes sometimes. And you mentioned that might have possibly happened to you recently in relation to an injury that just maybe didn't get diagnosed correctly the first time around that way. I'm curious to hear more about what that is and, where you're at now on that.
Yes, I would love to talk about that. So, this is a big lesson for me. And again, I think a lot of people in my position could resonate with it. But, when you're in college, you have, like I had mentioned, these PT trainers, and they understand what I call like the context of your body because they're there every day. They're seeing you training every day. If I had a little tweak or a muscle strain, they knew what may have led up to that and what to do and how I normally move and how I'm moving now. And so getting out of college and having an injury, and for me, like I don't have a background in exercise science or any form of sports science. I wish I did at this point. I wish I did. I could definitely have utilized it. Um, but I need the help of experts. And so what I've been doing is, listening to podcasts like yourself or looking on YouTube or, pulling resources because I don't have the knowledge to diagnose myself. And so a few months ago, it was around Christmas time, was playing indoor soccer, and I had done something to my quad. I had worked a 9-hour shift, gone straight to this indoor soccer game, and I just pivoted. I went up for a header and I stepped and I pivoted, and I was like, oh, that kind of strained my quad a little bit. And it hurt for a few days after that. And then I was like, you know what? I'm going to be a responsible adult and I'm going to schedule a doctor's appointment. And so I scheduled a doctor's appointment with like a general practitioner's doctor. That's just how my healthcare works. I can't immediately go in and see a sports specialist. I have to see a general practitioner first. And so I got in about a month later, and this was after I had gone and tried out for this team, right? So I had tried out on this injury. It was not something I was like molding my life around. It was not career, and like I didn't think anything up, right? So I go in there, and the doctor's asked me a few questions. He asked me how it happened, where it hurt, whatnot, and then he did the Lockman test on me. This was my right leg. I was doing like squats. I'm like, yeah, it hurts when I do the squat. It hurts when I do a lunge. And he's doing it, and he's like, so when did you hurt it? And I was like, about 6 weeks ago. And he was like, yeah, you blew out your ACL. And I was like, what? That's not what I came in for. So he then put me in a giant leg brace and got me in for an urgent MRI. So I got an MRI that following Saturday. And when he was talking to me about what was diagnosed as a torn ACL, I'm not joking. My vision went black. I literally thought I was going to pass out. I had to be like, okay, could you stop talking for a second and recline my seat because I'm going to pass out if you keep talking, because I had made this whole opportunity for myself, right? And then to hear this shattering news that I would be potentially out for 9 months was just gut wrenching. And so anyways, I went home, waited for the MRI, got the MRI, got results the next Tuesday. Everything was intact. So I had gotten a really bad scare. And then I went in later, got an x-ray. Then I saw a sports doctor who told me my ACLs were great, that my quads were strong. I shouldn't, that I had quad tendonitis. I had some minor quad tendonitis, and I've been rehabbing it, and it's been getting so much better since it happened. But the lesson there is that, again, when you're out of college and you don't have someone who works with you on a daily basis, whether you're in between professional clubs or you're in high school even, you don't have someone who regularly looks at you. And so for him to give me this knowledge, and I trusted him because he's a doctor and they know what they're talking about usually. I took this and I was just like, oh my gosh, okay, I know my body. I need to make a really valiant effort to get in with someone who knows a little more about knees specifically and sports athletes. But I came out of that with this sobering realization that being out of college and being an athlete on your own, a free agent, is difficult, in that everything you do, you're doing from scratch, and you're going to get kind of inconsistent feedback from people because they don't fully understand where you're at in life and your goals in the context of your body.
What an incredible experience. I mean, I'm sorry that you had to undergo this emotional roller coaster of being told you tore your ACL and then finding out you didn't. I mean, that's the lowest of low and the highest of highs, all within like 5 days of each other, which is just incredible. And there's a few things I want to draw from that. I mean, first off, you mentioned about when you were in college, you had this team of individuals around you. And in a perfect world, that team is all working in the best interest of you. The common goal is you, the athlete. And I cannot emphasize how important that is enough for all athletes out there. I don't care what sport it is, what age you are. If you're an athlete, you have to have this team of individuals around you so that if something goes wrong, you know who to go to, who to call, what to do, and so on that way. So PT, AT, strength coach, sports scientist, sports psychology, sports nutrition dietitian, orthopedic, all these different things. And, some people might need certain ones, some people might need all of them. It really varies based on the individual. But in general, there's a lot of different disciplines out there. And I think that athletes may potentially need to have access to all of them. Some might only need one or two. But again, there's a lot of people out there that you might want to surround yourself with from a team environment. And two, you definitely want to vet those people. Make sure that they've actually got some experience working with athletes, working with individuals such as yourself. Maybe they've got some additional training or something of that sort that way, because I've seen a lot of athletes go to individuals because, well, they're nice people or they know them, but unfortunately, they don't know sports and they don't necessarily know what goes into a sports injury or what it might take to get you back to where you want to be or just how crazy your day-to-day life is. To put an example to that, most physical therapists see their patients 2 to 3 times a week. Yet when we clear you to go back to sport, you're probably playing your sport anywhere between 5 to 7 days a week. So how are we adequately preparing you to go back when we're only seeing you 2 to 3 times a week? That's only half of what you're going to be doing. And oh, by the way, we're probably only seeing you for 45, 60 minutes if you're lucky. When you go back to sport, that's more like 2+ hour practices every single time. So ensuring that we understand what you're going through and how we can help you bridge the gap and always acting your best interest. And part of that is just understanding, like I said, sports. I think the other piece to that too is actually teaching you what we're doing, what it means, and so on that way. I don't like it when people come back to see me for the same issue over and over and over again. Part of my job is to treat it, but the other part is to actually teach you what it is, what it means, and if it ever comes back, how to handle it yourself so that hopefully you don't have to come back and see me. And I think the best individuals in the space that I've been fortunate enough to meet emphasize that education piece so, so heavily. And you see that with coaches too. They don't just tell you what to do. They help you learn, grasp the concept, grasp the underlying principles that go into it, and then motivate you to go out and make the change. And I think that us in the medical space need to have a very similar mindset and philosophy to that. And it's a shame that that's not the common standard. With that said, I do think it's possible for medical providers to make mistakes. And I think that as frustrating as it can be for us, especially on the outside, like it's so easy to critique when someone else in the space makes a mistake. However, at the end of the day, we're all human and we all make those mistakes from time to time. I've certainly pushed for certain athletes to get MRIs in the past, and thankfully, they come back fairly clean, but it's one of those things where we don't know which way it's going to go, and I'd rather be safe than sorry. So understanding that it is possible for people to make mistakes, and although it can be extremely frustrating and extremely, just like I said, emotional turmoil for a little bit, at the end of the day, we are all human, and I think we need to humanize the space a little bit more as well.
Yeah, 100%. And honestly, one big thing that I pulled from the experience was how robust my mother's healthcare is. Like I had a great, they got me an MRI like days after. Like it was a great experience. I got X-rays and MRIs and free of cost for me. So, and honestly, even that doctor, he was so helpful, and he sent me a little note like through my portal of my healthcare afterwards, and was like, I'm so happy to see it came back clean. And again, he reported a positive, my tibia was moving. So it wasn't like he was necessarily even wrong. It's just, I know my MRI looked fine. And maybe I just have like a more lax ACL. But yeah, no, I agree. And it was the best case scenario outcome. It's better safe than sorry, I guess you use that phrase, because he could have easily been something wrong, and maybe if he cared a little less, he would have just kind of brushed it off and been like, you're probably fine. So I agree. I think definitely giving those medical professionals grace. And I do think I've just kind of taken on this responsibility of doing my own education on what could potentially be wrong with my body, because as much as I am in tune with it, I don't know, the specific, I can't name all the muscles in my legs, the way that you guys do. And so that's been a big part of my journey here now too, is like, I'm on YouTube, I'm researching things. I'm like, why does this hurt the way this does? And as I get older and injury prevention becomes, more and more important, I'm really just focusing on that aspect, because I want to be healthy going into these opportunities where I am gaining exposure. So I completely agree with that.
Yeah, and it's funny because it's like, everyone obviously has a human body that way, but it doesn't come with an owner's manual. And it's just
Yeah.
so difficult to figure out some of these simple little things like, what is my body trying to tell me right now? Why does that hurt? Why is that sore? And it's crazy to think that, we have to actually go to someone else to kind of get insights on that. But I think, as you mentioned, the more we educate ourselves and view opportunities to do that even further, right? Like some individuals I've worked with have been injured and been out for a little bit of time, but they actually use that as an opportunity to learn more about fueling strategies and nutrition and the importance of sleep. And they kind of play around with things in that time as well. They play around with their bedtime a little bit. Hey, do I feel better if I go to sleep earlier or maybe a little later, or if I keep my bedtime the same? So it's like, trying to find any kind of situation, the opportunities within it to, improve your own situation that way for yourself in the moment and also in the future that way, I think tends to pay dividends.
Yeah. And I can even think back to the times where I was in college, and I've gotten multiple MRIs before. It's not like I haven't had, minor things come up or concerns. And while I've never had full tears, I've done things like, hyperextend my knee, or got a really bad bone bruise that, required imaging. And I think back to those times where I had a PT spokesperson basically with me going into these doctor appointments and telling them what's wrong with my knee based on their diagnosis. And now I don't have that person. So that becomes me. And so that's one where I have this growing appreciation for the field, but also this necessity for me to understand what's going on until I can get back in the space where I can have people who help me with that.
100%. I love that. And, earlier on in this little discussion we've been having, you were talking about kind of your journey as an athlete and how you're getting into the semi-pro space and all that way. And you talked about your time management that way. And I think that that's another thing a lot of people don't quite understand is I think a lot of times we see athletes on the TV or doing all these incredible things, or we think, well, they played D1 college ball, so they must have made so much money when they were there. And I think we tend to forget that, not every sport has this wealth of funding and gives out $1 million contracts to every athlete that walks, in the field that way. And it sounds like from you that way, it sounds like you're pursuing your dream, like we mentioned, but you're also having to balance that with working multiple jobs just to even fund that end goal and that end, dream that way, that we're dream chasing, if you will. You're not making enough from actually engaging in like high level sport in order to like fund just your daily necessities that way. Is that correct?
Yeah, yeah. Being pursuing pursuing college sports even, it's costly. It's expensive to be on club teams. It's expensive to get gear. It not only do you benefit from exposure, but you benefit from having some funds to get exposure and to get yourself trained and whatnot. And so definitely there is this balance in between like I do have to work, and it's not just because I want to, because I do like the work that I do, which is nice because not everyone does, like that. But it's also because I'm not in a space where my old college coach would say women's professional soccer is still in the dark ages in terms of development and funding, and we still have so many teams that don't have adequate resources and sponsorships. We still have teams that don't have, medical aid on site during practices and stipends that are livable. That's one of the reasons why I got a remote job was so if I did go play somewhere like overseas, I had an additional source of income because it's just not where it needs to be yet. And I do think it's making headway. We have like the USL Super League, the emergence of the USL Super League this past 2024, and that's a significant stride in the professional women's soccer sphere. But it's still growing and adapting, and until we have that, you've just got to make things work, and it really comes down to how bad do you want it. As cliche as it sounds, how bad do you want it? Because if you want it bad enough, you're gonna work to make ends meet. And I'm very privileged to come out of college with no debt, and so that makes things a little easier. But ultimately, working while playing is a requirement right
Yeah,
now.
and I think this is also a space where I know a lot of people hate on it, but I really love social media and TikTok for this because
Yeah,
I've met a lot of athletes that have been able to kind of like monetize and develop this almost like personal brand, if you will, for what they do as an athlete. And, maybe they don't necessarily land the big commercial deal that ends up on TV, but they kind of like going back to what we talked about before, the opportunity isn't there, the door doesn't open, so they build their own door and they kind of make their own platform to advertise on and connect with people on and so on that way. And I think that that's something that, is just very overlooked, I think. We literally have the ability now to give athletes the tool to monetize their own brand, their own name, and all of the things that they do on the day-to-day basis that way. Like you can make posts that make money just off of showing people what you do on the day-to-day, and people love to see that. It inspires people, it motivates people. So I just think that there's so much more evolution that's occurring in this space that maybe we haven't fully realized the potential of yet.
yeah, I do think, as saturated the media is, I personally believe there is a bit of an untapped market for women in the professional soccer field and many professional sports field in terms of them representing themselves online and showcasing their journey. Because I think about what I would love right now is resources and how to get my foot in the door. And if that means me becoming, a platform and trying my best to, which I'm not the best at promoting myself online is something I'm trying to get more comfortable with because it's sports and entertainment. You are as much an image to this team and organization as you are a player. And what garners views isn't just the sport, but it's the player. You are a brand yourself. And I was coming out of college on the tail end of NIL, but I definitely got to experience some of its impacts. And I did land a few, minor deals that really opened my eyes to the world of you're not just selling yourself as a player, you're selling yourself as an image for something. And if you can leverage that online platform, it makes a significant difference. And also I would say that the social media presence also kind of balances out the exposure aspect in the sense that I don't necessarily need to spend all my credit card points to go to Florida to try out if I can make a really great highlight video and push that out to the coaches. So I do think it's something that if you're in a similar position, or even if you're looking to get college exposure, if you can put yourself online and showcase your talent and your skills and maybe even like a unique angle about yourself, I think that's gonna be really important, and it's only gonna grow in importance.
100% agree with that. And you mentioned that unique angle that way. We obviously talked about your unique misdiagnosis story that way. Have there been any other unique challenges or obstacles that have presented themselves to you throughout your journey as an athlete, or even just kind of going through academics and all that way?
You know, I don't know. I think I know we call them student athletes, and sometimes we can be athlete students, but I think for a long while I was much more student than athlete, in the sense that I wasn't initially going to play soccer in college, and I had a position in track, but I feel like being on a team is a completely different uh, playing field, no pun intended, but it's literally, it requires so much more time. And going in, I really had this focus on academics, and I'm passionate about policy, and I'm passionate about writing. I love it. And even in my master's program, I was kind of waffling with the idea of whether I wanted to pursue professional soccer. And through my master's, I made significant strides in the career realm pertaining to my education. I created an audio documentary. It's on Spotify, and that's how I was able to get my current job, my jobs. And it wasn't really until I took a step back and I was like, you really got to focus on what kind of ignites that fire in you and what really makes you excited. And when I think about it, I just love competing. I am a competitor at heart. I can be incredibly vicious, and I love to exercise, and I love fitness. And if I can translate and hone in those skills, and as well as just lifestyle preferences, into something like a sport, a professional sport, I was like, I wonder what would happen if I tried to pursue that. I also think, as many athletes are, we're in this pursuit of greatness, in the sense of, if we can hone in on ways to make ourselves great, and if we can channel that in any direction, I think we're going to go with it. And I think I just naturally have this kind of relentless attitude to pursue greatness. And I found an avenue that's kind of allowed me to do it. And so I'm not someone that, and I don't mean for this to come off like boasting, I'm not someone who necessarily needs to go out and party or drink or socialize excessively. I like, getting up and doing the work. I like making myself tired. I like having multiple jobs and trying to play soccer at the same time. I live for that. I live for the grind, as cliche as it is. And so I'm not sure if that's a unique angle, but definitely just some realizations about myself and my own personality and what complements that in terms of lifestyle. It just felt like pursuing soccer was a natural route for me. And it's also one of those things where I can always pursue a higher degree later in life, but you can't, playing a professional sport, it does have a timestamp. It does have a time stop, in the sense of, you get older and your body changes, and it becomes harder to stay fit, to stay healthy. And while sports science and exercise science has made significant advancements in preserving the athlete's body, I think now is the time to pursue it, if that's really what I want to do. And I've just decided to make that commitment and go with it. I think going back to that imperfect action, we're just going to try it. And you know what? Even if I don't succeed in the goals I set for myself, I think even attempting them will bring me some form of satisfaction.
Yeah, full send. You got to go all in.
Full send.
You only get one life, and it's too short for us to look back and think and wonder, what if I did something differently? If
Yeah.
today you never say what if, then tomorrow you're always going to have more than enough. And it sounds like a lot of where you're at now came from just knowing yourself and being really honest with who you are and what you value and all that way. And that's something I notice a lot of athletes struggle with, and they struggle to kind of look at themselves in the mirror and understand what they really want out of life that way. How did you go about developing that? Like a journaling practice or writing or?
Yeah. I think innately, and I think everyone will say that at some point, but they say they're like an introvert. I think a lot of my life, I have been really introverted. And as much as I love to, socialize and talk, I think I find that expressing myself through a sport has been a really natural avenue for myself. And it's something when you're younger, because many athletes, not all, but many athletes were pushed into their sport at a young age. I was included in that. I've played soccer since I was, 5 or 6 years old. And at the time, I didn't realize it, but then now getting older and just getting the opportunity to go and play like pickup games or recreational leagues while I'm kind of in this transition phase before my semi-professional season, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is how I love to socialize. This is how I love to express myself. And I want to do that as long as possible. And I also want to do that at a high level because that's another aspect of my personality is I like to get better at things. And so, yeah, I think a big part of who I am lies in what I do on a daily basis, as we all are. And what I like to do is I like to exercise. I like to stay fit. And I also recognize like as someone who's pursuing both a more traditional career path and one that's maybe a little more unorthodox, I've come to realize that as a professional athlete, as an inspiring professional athlete, you kind of have a specialization. Because if you look at the statistics of how many people even go in to play a collegiate sport, it is a very small percentage of the population of people. And then those who go beyond that is even smaller. And so I actually found, to my bitter surprise, it was a little easier to get on a soccer team than it was to land a job in this current job market. Um, so it does show like there is a sort of specialization with what you do and kind of how I I don't know. I honestly like I landed this semi-professional role like in 2 months versus it's taken me about 6 months to even get a job. So that was a little sidetrack, but yeah, it's been interesting to see both play out, trying to pursue both.
Yeah, no, 100%. And it's so interesting that you've been able to find the opportunity in soccer a little bit easier than the opportunity in, the job market that way. I mean, I think that just must speak volumes to how good you are as a soccer player.
Well, we'll see about that. I think I growing up again, like I was committed for track. I was very athletic, but I wasn't able to hone my skills in as a player because I really didn't have access to those types of resources growing up because I'm from a really rural area. Like again, it would take me like a 2 hour drive to even go and play on a club team and to get that type of personal training or group training out in the city because I live in a very small town was really difficult, both time consuming and really costly. And so I really relied on my athleticism and my speed and my strength to get in these positions. And now I'm realizing kind of what are my weaknesses and how can I kind of strengthen them, like things just refining. Like I was making some goals for myself for this season. I was like, how can I on paper stand out in a way that would make me an attractive asset to a professional team? And as someone who's an outside back, I think about things like assists. I'll get all the way up the field, winning my 1v1s on defense, blocking shots, denying, corners, winning 50-50 balls in the air. Statistical things like that and honing in on them and trying my best to go out. And again, I'm going out by myself on my old high school field. I'm using the resources I have and just trying to focus in on them. I'm really trying to break down these goals into really actionable steps because I do take them really seriously and I want to complete them. And so I guess that's the only way I think I'll see progress if I really, take an organizational standpoint.
No, I love that. I love that so much, Marley. And as we start to wrap up here, I realize we've covered a lot in relation to your journey in the past, the present, and what the future might be looking like for you. Is there anything we missed or anything else you want to share about that?
No, I think we'll see if I can put my money where my mouth is.
I'm pretty confident that you'll be able to pull it off, Marley. And obviously, there's going to be some people listening that want to keep up to date with your journey and see all the incredible things that you continue to do moving forward that way. Where can they find you at online and keep up to date with all the great things that you're doing?
Yeah, I'm pretty active on Instagram. It's just Marley Salveter, MarleySalveter. I'll probably be posting soccer updates, so stay tuned on there.
That's awesome. We'll link to that in the description below too. That way, if you didn't quite catch it, you can just click there. Keep up to date with all the great things that Marley is up to. Marley, this was amazing. Thank you so much for your time.
Yes, of course. And thank you so much for having me on.